Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to support my dear friend, the Conservative MP from Louis Saint Laurent. His private member's bill is timely and will inject some badly needed common sense into how we conduct environmental impact assessments in this country. The goal of this legislation is rather straightforward. It would allow for a single environmental impact assessment for each project to avoid unnecessary duplication. It would make the system more efficient, more cooperative, and more predictable. All things that no one in Canada could ever possibly say about the current environmental assessment process. The legislation proposes the creation of a mechanism of agreement between the federal and provincial governments to reduce duplication of federal and provincial environmental assessments. Now, it speaks volumes that a prairie boy from Manitoba and a distinguished parliamentarian from Quebec can see eye to eye on such an important issue facing our country. In our Conservative caucus, we work together on ways to bring our country together rather than tear us apart. We understand that a rising tide lifts all boats, and we don't go looking for fights with premiers or infringe on provincial jurisdiction. Now, under this Liberal government, of course, that has not always been the case. We have seen ministers and even the Prime Minister pit East versus West and rural versus urban. It shouldn't be this way. It's dangerous and it's short-sighted. No wonder why there is more division and anger than at any moment in my life in this country. Now, I view this legislation as a first step in rebuilding that trust and respect amongst our regions and our provinces. It will provide a pathway for all levels of government to sit down and work together to actually get projects off the ground. And as the member for Louis Saint Laurent so eloquently said during his speech, the bill, quote, strives for collaboration, not confrontation. The Ottawa knows best approach is what is dividing our country. We only have to look at the Supreme Court's decision on Bill C-69, which found certain elements to be unconstitutional. It was a naked federal power grab that infringed on provincial jurisdiction. And while it was unfortunate that it took the Supreme Court to determine that this once and for all, it provides all of us a reminder that even the federal government can be humbled. Even the most powerful and sanctimonious are not exempt from the Constitution. There was once a time in this country where we got things built. The railway that forged the nation together and connected East and West. The St. Lawrence Seaway that opened the country to the Atlantic Ocean, or the Trans-Canada Pipeline, where Western energy fueled the major cities of Eastern Canada. These projects provided the foundation of our economy, and without them, we could not get our products to market. And I simply cannot imagine what our economy would look like today without them. And they are still contributing, Mr. Speaker. They are still contributing wealth and prosperity to our country, creates countless jobs and contributes the taxes that pays for our schools, our healthcare, and our highways. This brings us to the bill we have in front of us today. Canada is now a place where undertaking a project has become so risky, companies would rather take their money elsewhere, anywhere for that matter. And the proof is in the pudding, Mr. Speaker. The number of natural resource projects completed between 2015 and 2024 has declined by 36.4%. And according to the government's own numbers, in its annual inventory, it shows a steep decline in major projects that are under construction or planned in the next 10 years. In 2015, the inventory held $711 billion in major projects, but by 2023, that had dropped to just $572 billion. The reality is that over the years, governments have made it so incredibly complicated, layered with various departments and agencies, that navigating the environmental assessment process is simply too daunting for people and companies to want to do. Now, I would be remiss to not point out that various politicians, such as the current Minister of Environment and Climate Change, they view this regulatory nightmare as a success because it stops certain projects from ever getting off the ground in our country. But don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. In a previous lifetime as an environmental activist with a bit of a penchant for getting arrested every now and then, our Minister of Environment was quite proud of his efforts to derail the Energy East pipeline. The reality is that activists will never agree to certain projects, regardless of the process or conditions or even their purpose. There's no lithium mine that could be used to build electric batteries in this country that would be good enough for these activists. They'll move on from one argument to the next until something sticks. They believe if they can bog down the entire process, inevitably it will scare off the proponent of that project. It is disingenuous, as almost all of these activist organizations, many of them, if not most of them, foreign funded, have no intention of trying to make sure certain projects are built in the most environmentally conscious way. They want them stopped, no matter what and at all costs. And now, unfortunately, the fox is in the henhouse, running the Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada. No wonder why Canada can't get anything built anymore. The truth is that these activists will use every tool at their disposal, including hijacking the environmental assessment process to advance their own ideological goals. Now, that is their right. We do live in a democracy. People are entitled to their opinions, and they're entitled to speak out as they see fit. But what people aren't allowed to do, Mr. Speaker, is to violently attack pipeline workers, like what's happened in British Columbia. The fact that radicals armed with axes attacked their fellow citizens just because they were working on an approved pipeline speaks volumes to how radicalized some people have gotten in this country, and no thanks to the Prime Minister and to this current government. So how did we end up in a place where extremists threaten fellow Canadians, vandalize and destroy property, and defy court orders? How did we become a place where activists can just barge into a room and violently disrupt an energy board hearing? The reality is that even when governments think they are creating the conditions to get a social license, it will never appease these activists. They aren't interested in the facts. They don't care about the evidence. They just want to stop projects from being built in this country. And I challenge any one of my fellow MPs to ponder this question. In the year 2024, could we have built the Canadian Pacific Railway through the Rocky Mountains? Really, think about it. Does anybody believe we could actually have built that railway in this current process? Could we have built the Trans-Canada Pipeline through the Canadian Shield if this project started in 2024? It's a frightening thought experiment, but it underscores how precarious our situation is currently. And whoever would have thought that the federal government would have spent billions of dollars to nationalize a pipeline just to get it built in this country? As we look to the future and to the incredible deposits and wealth of natural resources of critical minerals that our nation has been blessed with, will Canada seize the moment, or will it just be yet another wasted opportunity? Now, sadly, under this current Liberal government, they have not only failed to capitalize on that opportunity, but they have made it that much more difficult to get a mine up and running. In fact, under their watch, we have seen a decline of 36.4% of completed mines and a 55% drop in total value of proposed mining projects. At the time when these critical minerals are needed to build our electronics, our batteries, and our solar panels, do we have an impact assessment process that will get these mines operational? At a time that the Beijing regime has cornered the critical minerals market, which puts our manufacturers and our entire supply chains at risk, do we have an impact assessment process to free ourselves from the whims of a dictatorial country and become a reliable supplier to our allies in an increasingly volatile world? And at a time that our European allies are desperate to rid themselves of Russian energy, do we have an assessment process to build infrastructure to get our LNG to port? These are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. Do we want to be a nation that upholds stringent environmental standards but also excels in actually getting things built? Or do we want to be a nation that stifles every opportunity at every turn while our adversaries and other nations around the world take advantage of their wealth of natural resources? I say, let's work with our provincial counterparts to make government efficiency the standard practice rather than the occasional experience. Let's respect the Constitution and provincial jurisdiction. Let's stop the adversarial legal and political battles preferred by the high-priced lobbyists and lawyers. And let's transform Canada into a place where the foremost talent in environmental sciences, engineering, biology, and scientific research actually work together rather than at odds. Let's get Canada working again, Mr. Speaker.